good to have a chat with you. Now, the thing about this week, it's a really important week for children and gardening, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's Children's Mental Health Week, which to be honest with you, like gardening connects so well with that because it really does change how children react with parents, teachers, grown-ups, and each other as well. So it's an important connection there, Ken, that we can really push forwards.
I mean, I found in the past that children, just looking at children generally and their views on growing, it's incredible ignorance, isn't it? I mean, I remember taking a group of kids to a garden and showing them the tops of carrots, and I brushed across the top of the carrots and said, "What do you think they are?" And they had absolutely no idea that there was actually a carrot in the ground underneath. And it's horrific, isn't it, really?
I mean, yeah, it is getting better. That's the reason I love doing children's gardening is because I always describe it as like being a magician because everything's magic, everything's so exciting, and that's why I love it so much. But yeah, it has changed very slowly over the years. I've been doing children's gardening for 10 years now,
Mm.
and 10 years ago, if you ask children how things are grown or how or where vegetables come from, the general answer will be the supermarket. And very slowly, children are starting to realize that's not the case. But
Yeah.
I just think we need to do more to try and teach them how to actually grow that strawberry, that tomato, and actually get outside there and get their hands messy.
And that is what it's about. And if you think at very early age, even in when they're in preschool, they're playing in mud and learning about the environment in a lot of ways because they do a lot of forest work, don't they, in the same time, and that's preschool prior to going to infant school. And so they're now encouraging children, aren't they, to start in a very early stage, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think that's really important as well. I always talk about how, for instance, we're going to get a whole new generation of gardeners in the future into the industry, out there working for it, right? And if we don't do that, like really early on preschool gardening and learning and getting excited about growing, then we're never going to get that in the future. Do you know what I mean? We need to do that really early on in life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can see me laughing because I'm not convinced you're absolutely right there. I don't think we'll get a generation of gardeners that are in the industry. I think we might end up with a generation of people who are interested in gardening for, and one of those reasons that you've pointed out earlier on there is, of course, is the mental health thing. It's so good for you, isn't it?
It's good to be outside, isn't it? I mean, I think one, children learn more from, and I think we all do learn more from being outside. But just being outside can make such a big difference to how children's day goes, just in school or even at home, of how they learn. Because, and I think we both know the mental health benefits as adults of just
Yeah.
what being outside does. But like just feeling that soil between your fingers and being there and watching something grow, it makes such a big difference because, and one thing I always say it teaches children is patience, Ken. I mean, you clearly know what patience is, right? I think now a younger generation don't know what patience is, and that's something that we can really instill in children. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, you've gone down the route of encouraging children. I mean, just before I must talk about your book in a moment, but um, how do you personally you go into schools and try and encourage them to participate and end up with vegetables being cooked and then served up for their meals?
Yeah, that's the important part of it, isn't it? I mean, to be honest with you, what I really try and do in my role is to really try and concentrate on the children, obviously, but teachers specifically, because the teachers are the ones that are really going to keep that garden adventure going. So if we can get teachers involved in it within schools and get them on board on that adventure, then I think that can really help. But by connecting gardening and grow your own, so there's actual food involved in it, I think we can get children more interested in gardening then. And I'd personally do something where we get children to grow for a pizza, because what child doesn't love pizza, right? So if they've got that imagery of what they're growing towards, that they're
Yeah,
going to be able to put them tomatoes on top of a pizza, put them peppers on there, then children are going to be more interested, more excited about actually growing and caring for it as well and taking responsibility for it.
that's very, very true indeed. I mean, I think gone are the days when they used to just grow a couple of beans in a jam jar in school and a bit of cress on a bit of blotting paper, and we have moved on from that very, very positively, haven't we?
Yeah. Do you know what? My daughter, I asked her what she did one year for gardening. And she said, "Oh, I did some gardening today, Dad." And I was like, "Oh, what did you do?" And we were like, put a bean in a plastic bag and stuck it to the window. And I was like, "Well, hold on a minute." I was like, "What? That is not gardening." We changed. We actually got into school and we actually got them hands in the soil, got them growing stuff. Everyone always goes straight for radish, right? Oh,
Yeah,
let's grow radishes. They're really fast, really quick. But if you name me a four year old to 8 year old that loves radishes, then actually I won't say I'll give you £1,000 because someone will go, actually, my child likes radishes.
yeah.
But generally, no, kids don't get excited about radishes. We need to get them growing stuff that they love to eat. That's the thing.
That's the important thing. Tell us a bit about your
Do
book.
you know what? My book's been about for a while, Ken, and I love it so much. It is gardening for me has been about teaching children how to grow, but me specifically is spending time with my daughter, who's 8 years old now,
Yeah,
and literally from the age of 2 months old, she was gardening. We put a few wildflower seeds in her hand. She sprinkled them across the floor and we got wildflowers growing in our garden. Right, I always love telling that story. She doesn't remember it, but from that age, we literally spent years and years, like up to the age of 4, growing stuff together and learning what really works. And I made a book. She was part of that book, and that's part of that experience. And then loads of different ideas with upcycled and recycled ideas that parents can do with their children, which doesn't cost the world. Because one of the things that gardening can be sometimes is quite expensive. If we
very
want,
expensive.
yeah, right. And if we want parents and children to start gardening, we need to make it cheap and easy for them to really get interested in it. So that's what the book's about. It's basically me and my daughter's journey and loads of different ideas amongst that work. Because I know, I was a long time ago a Blue Peter gardener before I had my daughter, I was throwing ideas out on TV, which now as a parent I realise would be very difficult to do. I mean, making a wormery out of a chest of drawers looks amazing on TV. Doing that with a 3 or 4 year old is pretty impossible.
I should
So
think
yeah, I like it. So I wanted to make a book that was easy for parents to get involved. So yeah, it's called How to Get Kids Gardening. It really, it's one of my best things I think I've ever done.
I think you have a point there that so often a lot of things are aimed at children, but they're not cheap. I mean, you've got tools that are expensive, and seeds aren't actually, well, some seeds aren't cheap, some seeds are. And I think, the industry has changed a bit because a lot of the seed companies now do ranges specifically for children, which is really important. Whereas if you go back, say, 20 odd years, I mean, even going back, I mean, I'm a lot older than you are, but if I go back to my childhood, chances are there were no seeds for children, whereas that has changed dramatically, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's a real like concentration on children, I think, at the moment, where brands and companies want to like get more children gardening. But I always say to anyone that's thinking maybe this spring they want to sow some seeds, just ask your neighbours. Because if you've got any gardeners down your road that are growing outside,
Mm.
they're bound to, and I don't know about you, Ken, but my shed is full of seeds that I've still not managed to sow, right? I sow a lot of seeds, there's always some left over. If you're friendly with your neighbours, then asking them that, oh, you've got any, I don't know, any chili seeds or tomato seeds that we could borrow, that is probably the best way to get
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, I think swapping, sharing is very much what gardening should be about. And from quite an early age, you learn so much from other gardeners anyway. I mean, and this is what you're suggesting really is that, when I look back at my life, I've learnt so much from other gardeners. Okay, I did college, I did all the right things, but quite honestly, a lot of my learning has come from other gardeners. And what you're saying is exactly the same. You're saying, let's teach children to garden because it will help them, whether they do gardening as a career or whether they actually just have a patch in their home when they're married and got their own children. It doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, exactly. This is the reason I like concentrating on preschool and primary school children, is because look, secondary school, we know what it's like. There's so many different distractions, boyfriends, girlfriends, GCSEs, more importantly. And then when we go out of teenage years, we go into our early 20s. Again, you know, we're not going to be out there gardening generally. I mean, I love everyone to garden in really early 20s, but come the time we manage to rent a home or buy a place or have a small patch that we can call our own, that's when the education we do back in primary school all those years ago can really come into effect.
Just to, finally, what made you go into gardening? I'm just intrigued.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I got into gardening when I was 24. So I didn't do any gardening when I was younger. I missed out totally. And this is why I concentrate on it so hard now with my own daughter and getting other kids involved in it as well, because I feel like I missed out on that. But for me, it was about me and my brother coming together and learning something that we both didn't have a clue on. When I say I thought potatoes grew on like a little tree at the age of 24. I know I'm from Essex, but honestly, I had no idea. I honestly had no idea how any vegetables were grown, and I was in my 20s, right? And it was coming together with my brother and spending time and talking to people and learning together, and that got me excited and wanted me to share more to children to get them interested. So yeah, I love it so much. I love getting my hands messy. I love creating real memories with my daughter and my wife.
I'm scared to ask, but what did you do before you got to being a gardener at 24?
I was an electrician and I hated it, right? I hated being an electrician. I found gardening and I thought this is the career for me. I found it far too late. And as soon as I went into gardening, I got more electrical work than I ever wanted. So I don't want to be an electrician. Stop asking me to be an electrician.
It's interesting. What do you see? I mean, you've explained yourself and where you're trying to work at the moment. Where do you see yourself, say, in 5 years with the same project, working it forward?
For me, my biggest concentration at the moment is to try and get into government and try and actually make a difference within the curriculum, because I really see that as being a vital part in the
Yeah.
future, not for my daughter now, but for generations ahead. It takes a lot of time for this stuff to happen. But actually having it in the curriculum, having schools gardening daily, getting children learning, I think we're going to get a healthier generation from doing that. And yeah, I think it can make a big impact. But that sort of stuff takes time. So in 5 years' time, hopefully, we're that little bit step further towards that goal.
Lee, today you've told us about, your book, how you got into gardening, how you're projecting and working with schools, and of course the healthy side of gardening and getting them involved with growing vegetables. Where do you see the future? 5 years, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, this is a really important part for me. To be honest with you, so last year I was in the House of Lords and I was talking about government actually making a difference and bringing gardening and horticulture into the curriculum at a primary school level. And so over the next 5 years, we're going to be working towards that. And I really see that if it's in schools and we're getting children growing their own food, we're going to have a healthier generation in the future. So that's a big thing for me. I think that it's going to take time. All these things sort of do take a lot of time. And my wife said to me, literally said last year when I was in outdoors and I started this long journey, how long do I think it's going to take? And I think we're literally looking tens of years down the road. I don't think my daughter will even see the benefits of that come into the curriculum. But yeah, it takes a lot of time, doesn't it, Ken? But we'll make it happen.
I think, Lee, thank you very much for that, because I believe that government must think, as you've just pointed out, that it's an important aspect of health and good living, but it's going to take a long, long time. I think your estimates are possibly about right, 10 years plus.